What's up everybody on YouTube? AJ Russ back to discuss another video. Today we're going to be ranking the top 5 teams in the AFC for the 2024 NFL season. So guys, this is a video I've been looking forward to make. If y'all haven't checked out my top 5 NFC teams ranked for this upcoming season, go check it out. But for the AFC, I've been looking forward to covering this because honestly, it's literally the equivalent of the Western Conference in the NBA. So many stacked teams, so many playoff contending and Super Bowl contending teams. Of course, with the head of the snake being the Kansas City Chiefs. We thought they had 2 down years the past couple of seasons, and all they did was win 2 more Super Bowls. Patrick Mahomes has 3 total Super Bowls now, 3 Super Bowl MVPs, just adding to his resume and making the case potentially for being the greatest quarterback of all time when it's all said and done. So you still have to put them right now as one of the premier teams in the AFC. Then you have the Bengals, who made the Super Bowl a couple years ago, and of course have dealt with some of their injuries, Joe Burrow being out with that hand injury, but they're certainly still contenders when everyone is healthy and everyone is in the mix offensively and defensively. The Ravens made the AFC Championship game last year. They were the #1 overall seed, brought in Derrick Henry, and still have Lamar, who was a 2-time MVP now. That team will certainly be humming, even though they lost their defensive coordinator, who is now the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. And then you have teams that no one expected to be in this position, but that they are now. The Houston Texans, going into a second season with CJ Stroud, being really viewed as a top 5 quarterback already going into his second season. It's insane. Adding Stephon Diggs to that Texans team, adding pieces like Joe Mixon, defensively Danielle Hunter, and just a lot of pieces that make it seem like the Texans, they're poised to go deep in the playoffs and potentially be an AFC Championship contending team, or maybe even make the Super Bowl. And then you have teams like the Bills, who got rid of Diggs, still have Josh Allen. They drafted Keon Coleman, kind of had a reset, not necessarily a rebuild that they're doing right now. So we'll see where they potentially fall on the list if they are there at all. And also some wild card teams and potentially teams that still will be in the mix. The Jets coming back with Aaron Rodgers. That team certainly is set up to have success, but we'll see what ensues because you can't play the game on paper. It has to be played between the lines. The Miami Dolphins just extended Tua Tagovailoa, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. They lost Christian Wilkins to the Raiders, but they also drafted Chop Robinson and have some different pieces. Going to be dealing with the departure of defensive coordinator Vic Fangio, who left to be the defensive coordinator of the Eagles, but the defense will certainly still be solid, having Jalen Ramsey, and just a lot of teams that could be considered to be in the top 5. So with that being said, guys, before I get into the list, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know what we post about here, videos about the NBA, NFL, Marvel, DC, pop culture, cooking videos, real shorts, things of that nature. With that being said, let's rank these top 5 teams in the AFC, starting with number 5. So coming in at number 5, a lot of people may disagree, but I still have the Buffalo Bills being a top 5 team in the AFC for this season. I know the controversy. The Bills, they lost Stephon Diggs, they traded him, and they also released and got rid of a good amount of key guys. Players like Tre'Davious White, Jordan Poyer, Teron Neal,
Gabe Davis to the Jacksonville Jaguars,
and players of that nature. I mean, they definitely have had some departures that were some key players, but they've also added in some young development and still were able to keep some of their key players. They still have Ed Oliver.
Go Cougs.
They have Deion Dawkins on the offensive line still. They have Von Miller, who is on a kind of ugly contract because he got paid based on how he played with the Rams, but he still is a solid contributor to the Bills, and they will need more output of him this season. And they drafted Keon Coleman, who I believe can be a really good wide receiver for them right now and going into the future. Be a guy that catches those 50-50 balls. They still have Dalton Kincaid. They have Dawson Knox. They also still have James Cook, who really made a name for himself last season when interim offensive coordinator, who's now the offensive coordinator officially, Joe Brady, really put an emphasis on running the ball, but also James Cook was an integral piece in the passing game as well with the checkdowns that Josh Allen threw to him, and also just yards after the catch as well. James Cook was really good for them, and he'll continue to be good for them. But most importantly, they still have Josh Allen. And Josh Allen, we know the guy that he is, how he has developed throughout his career. When the Bills acquired Stephon Diggs in 2020, he ascended tremendously. But like I said, when Joe Brady became the offensive coordinator last season, they kind of departed from just throwing the ball all the time, and they really put an emphasis on running the ball. And that's how Stephon Diggs' role decreased ultimately, and Josh Allen was making plays. Even when it didn't get it to Diggs, he was still able to make plays to Gabe Davis and other targets, like I mentioned, in Kincaid and Knox. And of course, Josh Allen, what he can do as an athlete as well. I mean, last season alone, if you look at his stats, he threw for over 4,300 yards, had 29 passing touchdowns, and 15 rushing touchdowns, making it a total of 44 touchdowns. And I know the interception and turnover problem that we're going to talk about, he also threw 18 picks last year, but he's definitely the reason why the Bills have been knocking at the door in the AFC Championship games and ultimately trying to create a Super Bowl window. Now, in terms of ranking them as a top 5 team, I do think it's valid only because of this. They have Josh Allen, and there's a lot of unknown with teams in their own division, like the AFC East with the Jets and even the Dolphins. I know the Dolphins, they have a really good roster, and they could easily end up winning the division this year. I could be wrong, but the Bills have won in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. So evidence is that they're dominating the division. And the Dolphins, they had the lead in the division for most of the year last year until that last game. They kind of collapsed. and they had games where they lost against teams like the Titans, and then the Bills played the Dolphins for basically the division in the last game of the season and dubbed them. So that's what I'm saying. Even though they've lost players, a couple defensively and a player like Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, I still believe that the Bills, they have most of their core intact, which will lead them to winning their division and still being a playoff threat ultimately. And for the Jets, I mean, I think there's just a lot of question marks. They acquired some offensive line depth and things of that nature, and their defense is solid, even though Hassan Reddick requested a trade today, which is wild. Hasn't even played on the team, and the Eagles traded him to the Jets knowing that this problem was to arise, and the Jets, they knew they needed to pay him at some point. Maybe it'll end up happening. We'll see, but that's another question mark with their defense, even though their defense is good. I mean, obviously they have Sauce Gardner, Quentin Williams, among other pieces, but still, I think the Bills still will overcome all of that and win a division again. I could be wrong. I could be capped out, but I just don't think so. I mean, Josh Allen, I think he's going to continue to prove to people why he's continuing to elevate as a quarterback. Believe that he'll be 28 if he isn't 28 years old already this season. So really just stepping into his prime, or potentially not even there yet. So this squad, I think that they're going to surprise a lot of people, because a lot of people are predicting that they'll take a step back. I'm really bullish on this team because I think that they have most of their key pieces still intact, and that Josh Allen is going to have a really good year, maybe an MVP caliber year. We'll see what all happens, like I said, because the AFC is a gauntlet. You never know what teams will take off and what players will take off, but I certainly do believe that the Buffalo Bills are still a top 5 caliber team in the AFC, and that's why they are number 5. At number 4, we have a team that for sure took off last year. That's the Houston Texans. CJ Stroud, let alone. You can just say that name and we can just talk about him the entire time among the team, because he's the biggest reason why the Houston Texans now have a Super Bowl window potentially. We will see how things go this year. They didn't have expectations last year. They went 10-7, and now they have expectations with the players that they've added. But I believe CJ Stroud has really elevated his team to another level and to another height, being on his rookie deal going into his second season. And we're going to see more of that. I mean, obviously he had a sensational rookie year. In my opinion, the greatest rookie year of all time in NFL history, throwing for over 4,100 yards, having 23 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. That's insane at the age of 22 years old. Going into this year, adding pieces like I talked about earlier, Stephon Diggs, Joe Mixon, having Nico Collins, who got extended, having Tank Dell, who was back and healthy, still having Laramie Tunsil, who's one of the best offensive linemen in the league. This team, they're going to be nice. And not to mention DeMeco Ryans as well, one of the best coaches in the league, proved that in his rookie year as a head coach. The defensive philosophy, really how he ascended that Texans defense, they're going to be nice for sure. They added in pieces over free agency and players like Danielle Hunter, who's going to be really good for them. I think one of the most underrated defensive players in the league. Also DeMeco Autry. Brought in Jeff Okudah, linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair.
And also defensively, they still have Derek Stingley Jr., who was drafted 3rd overall in 2022, and he had some really good moments in the 2023 season as well. As long as he stays healthy, he can potentially take another step in 2024 and being cornerback number 1 for the Houston Texans and a foundational part of their future. Not to mention, in addition, also Will Anderson Jr., who was a 3rd overall pick last year, had a dominant rookie season, won Defensive Rookie of the Year. So the Texans, they really have a lot of great pieces offensively and defensively.
Dalton Schultz, who's another weapon for CJ Stroud. So that offense is really built to be successful this upcoming season, and same with their defense. It all comes down to execution ultimately, because they have enough, in my opinion, to compete at the highest level. Their division is an interesting thing in my opinion, only because of the Indianapolis Colts, and you can say the Jaguars too, but I'll talk about the Colts a little bit because Anthony Richardson, he's a big wild card. That Colts team is really good offensively and defensively too. We saw that they almost won a Division 2 last year. It really just comes down to his health and how they play, because Shane Steichen is a great coach. We saw that in his rookie year as a head coach as well. It just comes down to how Anthony Richardson is able to ascend in year 2 and how he's able to make decisions on when to run, when to make plays, and things of that nature. So that's a team that's going to contend with the Texans in their division, I feel like. And same with the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence just got that new extension. We'll see what they end up doing as a team, because they did add some pieces as well. They drafted Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, signed Gabe Davis from the Buffalo Bills, also extended Josh Hines Allen, I believe. So that team is going to be a certain mystery, but they could win a division as well too. So the Houston Texans, I do believe they should be the favorites to win the AFC South, and they are a top 5 caliber team. It just comes down to execution, because when teams have expectations, it's either they rise up to the occasion or they fold like a cheap tent. Last year, the Jaguars, they were 8-3 at one point, I believe. They ended up losing 5 straight, going 8-8, and then just ultimately losing the playoffs and collapsing. So that was one thing that was crazy. But for the Texans, I believe that they're going to be nice. I mean, a lot of people have been questioning if CJ Stroud will have a sophomore slump. I don't think so, because he was a definition of poise. I said this in previous videos and last year talking about the NFL season on my weekly recaps, which will be back this year. Stay tuned. But yeah, the Texans, they're set up to be successful. Nick Caserio has done a hell of a job designing this team and building it up when a lot of people had their questions about him in his first couple of years as general manager in Houston. But this team, it's a new era in Houston. I mean, the team was created when I was born, 2002, at least that's when the first season was, and they haven't really had real postseason success, only making the divisional round. They've never been to a conference championship in their franchise history so far, but this could be the year that it breaks through and they potentially make it. It really comes down, like I said, to execution, health, things of that nature. But offensively and defensively, they're set up to do well, and I do believe that the Texans are a top 5 caliber team, and they should be ranked at number 4 going into the 2024 season. Number 3, coming at the third spot, we have the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think it's a hard decision really, because based on what we've seen from Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, players of that nature, and he's going to be interesting because he's going to play this year in 2024, but he wants his money, and this could be the last year of T. Higgins being in Cincinnati, because also Jamar Chase wants his extension too. So you can't feed everybody with a salary cap era and how it's currently constructed. But Joe Burrow coming back, him being healthy, they're for sure going to be in the mix atop of the AFC and really battling for the AFC North. I know we have teams like the Ravens, which we'll potentially talk about soon, in their same division, but when you have Joe Burrow, a guy, literally a guy that can extend plays, also like I said, CJ Stroud, but really Joe Burrow because he's been in the league longer, the true definition of poise, of moxie, and just getting things done, Joe Burrow does that. I remember he was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the first few years of the league, and hopefully they're able to contain that problem. And they have a really good young coach in Zach Taylor. But this team, they can beat anybody in the AFC. They made the Super Bowl in the 2021-22 season for a reason. They surprised everybody then. In 2022, they made the AFC Championship game. Last year was a down year because Joe Burrow was hurt. But this year, if they're healthy, that's really all it depends on. It really just hinges on the health of Joe Burrow in my estimation. Obviously, you don't want key weapons like Jamar Chase or T. Higgins getting injured, especially, like I said, they want their money too and their bread. So if you have to end up trading a player like a T. Higgins, you don't want his value to go down because you want the maximum amount of assets. If they have everyone on one accord and healthy, I don't see why the Bengals wouldn't be one of the best teams in the AFC. They also signed Zach Moss from the Indianapolis Colts. He's going to be a key fixture in the offense as they did lose Joe Mixon. We've seen that the running back position is replaceable, unfortunately, to the running back's detriment, who have been wanting to get paid. So that'll be good for them though. Adding in Zach Moss, he'll be able to bring in some electric running potentially to that offense. I think he's really an underrated back. They have players defensively like Sam Hubbard, Trey Hendrickson, Joseph Asai, and defensive tackle BJ Hill. So I really think their defense, they could be solid and disciplined this season, that they'll be able to help the offense elevate as well this year. And we saw in 2022 what Joe Burrow did throughout that whole season, which this season could be similar to in terms of making the AFC Championship and making a deep run into the postseason. He had almost 4,500 yards, threw for 35 touchdowns and only 12 interceptions. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does something similar to that. I think at some point Joe Burrow will win MVP as well, because healthy and throughout the whole year, I do believe that he's still the second best quarterback after Patrick Mahomes. It's certainly a subjective opinion and take, but he's beat him as well. Only 2 quarterbacks that have beaten Patrick Mahomes in the Mahomes era so far since 2017, really since 2018 when he's been starting, are Tom Brady and Joe Burrow. So that's something to be said there, because Mahomes has had the Michael Jordan effect so far. But if there's any year that the Chiefs don't make the Super Bowl, or heck, don't even make the AFC Championship game, it could be because of the Bengals and just what they're able to do as a cohesive unit. It just really hinges on their health. That's why there's a lot of questions there, but they're third for a reason, and rightfully so at the third spot. I do believe that the Bengals, they're going to make some noise after Joe Burrow got hurt last year, after the team did miss the playoffs, although still being competitive. But and I wouldn't be surprised if they made a deep run and potentially made the Super Bowl again in the 2024-25 season. So now we're down to the final 2, and you could probably predict this for yourself, but that still doesn't absolve me from giving my takes and on why these 2 teams will fall where they are. But at number 2, we do have the Baltimore Ravens, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Number 1, they had the perfect road to the Super Bowl last year, being the number 1 seed, making the AFC Championship game after dominating the Texans in the divisional round. It was perfect. And then in the AFC Championship game, they strayed away from their identity. They stopped running the ball as much. They were trying to air out the ball with Lamar Jackson. While that offense has been great under Todd Monken in his first year last year, him being offensive coordinator, you had to stick to the running game. But you can't change the past. What happened? The Chiefs won and they ended up winning the Super Bowl. That's what happened. But there's some good news, because you don't have to stray away from the running game at all now. Adding in Derrick Henry. Yes, he's 30 years old now, but he's still super effective, one of the best backs in the league still. And that provides really a scary element, because you have Lamar Jackson, who defenses already have to spy, but now you have to account for Derrick Henry too. So that's going to be a tough sight. You still have players like Zay Flowers going into his second season. Had a really good rookie year. You have Mark Andrews returning fully. Have Isaiah Likely, who emerged as a really good tight end number 2. Could be a tight end number 1 on some teams as long as he continues to elevate. Still have Rashad Bateman and a lot of pieces like that offensively. Defensively, you still have Metabuke, who you were able to re-sign. Still have Raquan Smith. Did lose Patrick Queen to their division rival in Pittsburgh, but I still believe that the defense is going to be really good. They also lost their defensive coordinator and Mike Mignolet, Donald, who's now the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. But this team is still going to be really good, really dominant, and be one of the AFC's elite. In my eyes, you have Harbaugh, who's one of the best coaches in the league. Yes, it's been since the 2012-2013 season that he's won a Super Bowl, but the Ravens, they've still been really good every season, and in the Lamar Jackson era, they've been one of the best teams in the league. He's a two-time MVP for a reason. And also defensively, I forgot to mention Kyle Hamilton, who was really young going into his third season, but he is a really elite safety already, an integral part of that defense and why they're going to continue to ascend for years to come. So the Ravens, I mean, there's really no excuses to go. I mean, Lamar Jackson, I know he hasn't played the best in the postseason. That's one thing that we do have to talk about eventually, because unlike players like a Joe Burrow, who's been really efficient in the postseason, and CJ Stroud, of course, this was just his first year last year, so we can't really judge. Josh Allen, he's had a lot of games in the playoffs, and most of them he's played pretty good except against the Bengals and stuff like that. And Lamar Jackson, he has to come to the table in terms of performing in the postseason like he does in a regular season, because if he's able to do that, the Ravens, they'll potentially be able to win that Super Bowl that he promised them when he got drafted in the 2018 draft. But it really comes down to that. But adding in players like a Derrick Henry, that really provides the opportunity to do so and opens that window even further more for a Super Bowl. It just comes down to things like I said about the Texans, execution and philosophy. That's really what it comes down to, and not straying away from your identity like you did against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game. But if the Ravens, they're able to counter all that, they should be a fixture in the AFC too. But I mean, ultimately, you can only have one team that goes to the Super Bowl, two teams that go to the AFC Championship game, so something has to give. But the Ravens, I do believe that they're a top 3 team, and they're number 2 in the AFC going into the 2024 season. Now, lastly and most obvious, you know who's at number 1, the Kansas City Chiefs. Everyone's starting to hate them. They're low-key becoming like the Patriots, but I mean, it's a given. They're number 1. I talked about it earlier in the intro. Everybody thought that was a down year in 2023 for the Chiefs. All the drop passes, the inept performance of the wide receivers, and Patrick Mahomes was still able to will and guide this Kansas City Chiefs team to a second straight Super Bowl. And with Andy Reid being the great offensive-minded head coach that he is and play caller for them, they still have an opportunity to flourish this year even more. Now, I know there's questions, of course. Hollywood Brown did get hurt in that preseason game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're hoping that he'll be able to be available in the opening game against the Baltimore Ravens, so we'll see. But if not, Lord willing, we're going to see him throughout the season, of course, and be a huge part of the Kansas City Chiefs offense, along with players like Xavier Worthy, who they drafted, and of course, Travis Kelce, who's arguably the greatest tight end of all time. But really comes down to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that dude, we've never seen anything like him. Easily the most talented quarterback of all time. He's making his case to be the greatest of all time. We'll see what happens throughout his career, but he's still only 28 years old, turns 29 in September. The Chiefs, it really just comes down to him. I mean, we've seen that because we can count out the Chiefs all we want to throughout the season. We'll say, oh, the Chiefs, they look suspect in this area in week 7, week 8, but when we see in the first round of the playoffs or second round of the playoffs, if they're the first seed or whatever happens there, they start to get cooking and they start getting hot in the playoffs. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, he does this. His playoff record is 15-3, and his first season as a starter was 2018. He's 15-3. Some of his stats, he's thrown for over 5,100 yards in the playoffs, 41 touchdowns, and only 8 interceptions as well. Of course, he's won 3 Super Bowl MVPs, along with 2 regular season MVPs as well. But the record is already one of the greatest in NFL history. But the resume is already one of the greatest in NFL history, and he's just really continuing to build on it. So it's really ridiculous to say that the Chiefs aren't the number 1 team in AFC. I know some of these teams, you can make the case they're more talented, but Patrick Mahomes alone, he just ascends the team overall. And I know a lot of people are kind of frustrated about the NFL Top 100 list, him being at number 4. Everyone knows that he's the best player in the league. I mean, yeah, they could have Tyreek Hill at number 1, but bro, Patrick Mahomes is the best guy in the league. I'm not trying to glaze or anything like that. Actually, I'm not. But we haven't seen a player manipulate defenses like Patrick Mahomes has done throughout his career so far. Be the ultimate quarterback all-in-one, how he's able to manage the game, how he's able to dominate the game, and how he's able to manipulate the game in. And he's just really getting started. And that's a scary sight for the rest of the NFL. But the Chiefs, I mean, you can't count them out. If they win the Super Bowl again this year, they'll be the first team in NFL history to win 3 straight Super Bowls, having a three-peat, and that would be the 4th Super Bowl under the Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid era. I mean, it's just really insane. So we'll see what transpires and ensues, but the Chiefs, they have to be number 1. And I know some people might disagree. Some people might just hate the Chiefs and just don't care to hear that anyways and don't want to see them succeed. But I mean, it's hard not to put them at number 1, guys. So that's what it is. And going into the season, and right now in August of 2024, the Chiefs have to be the favorites in the AFC going into the season. So yeah, guys, let me know what y'all think in the comments down below. If you think the list is accurate, if there are some teams that you would potentially take off. I can already tell that some people may not believe that the Bills are a top 5 team, but I'm telling you guys, I still believe that they're going to be really good. Even though they retooled a little bit, I still think they're going to be a really good team. But a really good list, I think it's pretty accurate in my opinion, just humbly saying, because you look at teams like the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Texans. I mean, they're the most talented in the AFC, and there's a lot of talent in the AFC. There's going to be teams that are really talented in the AFC that don't even make the playoffs. I mean, if you look at the whole AFC North and the Ravens and Bengals division, I mean, people like the Browns, it really just hinges on Deshaun Watson if he's able to have any resemblance of any version of himself from Houston. That could be a team that gets talked about as well, because that defense is dominant with players like a Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward defensively, Njoku offensively at the tight end position, Amari Cooper still, and they added in Jerry Jeudy, bringing back Nick Chubb. I mean, that team is talented too. So like I said, guys, the AFC, it goes crazy. It is literally the equivalent to the Western Conference in the NBA. Also, didn't mention the Steelers, but who are always having a winning record under Mike Tomlin. I mean, it's crazy. It is insane, guys. But like I said, y'all let me know in the comments down below if you think this list was accurate, what you would change, and just let me know your top 5 teams overall in the AFC. I appreciate you guys watching. Always make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter/X at SwaggyRuss, and also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for cooking videos, shorts, reels, things of that nature. More videos are on the way, guys. I did the top 5 NFC, and in this video, the top 5 AFC teams, and stay tuned for the top 5 teams overall in the NFL going into this season. So a lot of stuff on the way, guys. Know that you matter, you have purpose, you are loved. I appreciate your support always coming back to the videos despite what I post, whether it's about the NFL, NBA, different vlogs, and stuff about pop culture. Y'all be blessed. Know that you matter. God loves you. Jesus loves you. Y'all have a good one, and keep being lit.